Chapter 73. Laura's drug state was finally wearing thin. She sat up, dizzily tottering. The padded room had stopped spinning, and the hallucinations had downgraded to profound relaxation. This wouldn't stop her from killing herself. This drug was a joke to prevent suicide. The straitjacket and the room were effective, but drugs couldn't stop her. "Please let me out," she said to the camera. "I won't hurt anyone, I promise." After a minute, the door opened. An Asian priest entered carrying a wooden chair. A black cassock covered his pale body. A white collar choked his neck, causing his carotid arteries to bulge. He closed the door behind him. That was quick service, she thought. Was this a return of hallucinations from the drug? But the medication wasn't that powerful now to create full-blown hallucinations. This must be real, unless she was insane. What was a priest doing here, though? She wanted out, not a sermon. Although she desired to ask him the time, she resisted. Appearing as a lunatic obsessed with time would only delay her release. The priest set the chair in front of her and sat, wobbling from the unstable cushioned floor. "Child, what ails you to try taking your life?" "I see the light now," she replied, sounding too religious to herself. She wasn't used to speaking like this. Although raised Catholic, doctrine hadn't been fed to Laura on a daily or even weekly basis. She believed in God, but she was a woman of science, which historically was at ends with religions. "I feel better. I don't want to die." The priest looked down and laughed. "Well, we all die someday, but to take one's own life is a sin." He looked deep into her eyes. "Do you understand?" "Sure." "Do you remember why?" She scratched her head against her shoulder. "I do." "It's like murder. You need to promise to God. Your body is a gift from God. It's part of His temple. To kill yourself is taking away what He gave." "I understand," she appeased, losing her balance and flopping onto the floor. The priest helped her up.
"It is so wrong. You would go to hell."
He paused, distress in his dark eyes.
"Do you want that?"
"Father," she said, keeping her face serious, "I value myself. I will never consider suicide again." He pulled out a black Bible from deep within his robe. His eyes flashed in the light, neck arteries rapidly pulsing.
"This isn't the only sin to avoid, though, is it?"
He raised his eyebrows. Unsettled, she asked, "What do you mean?" He opened the book and read aloud.
"God judges the righteous, and God is angry with the wicked every day. If he turn not, he will whet his sword. He spent his bow and made it ready. He hath also prepared for him the instruments of death. He ordaineth his ear arrows against the persecutors."
Although Laura didn't understand the passage, she replied in a fashion she thought the priest would desire. "That is so true, and beautiful, too." The priest continued.
"Behold, he travelleth with iniquity, and hath conceived mischief, and brought forth falsehood. He made a pit and dig it, and is fallen into the ditch which he made. his mischiefs shall return upon his own head, and his violent dealing shall come down upon his own pate.
This made more sense to Laura. No doubt she had created the pit she was trapped in, but why? What iniquity had she done? She had been a part of Project X. Was that it? Was she being punished or punishing herself from her past? She didn't have time for this moral conundrum. Father, can you speak to someone to get me out of the straitjacket? He looked into her eyes.
You relate to the words?
She nodded without hesitation. He blinked rapidly in succession, then smacked his lips.
I'll see what I can do.
He left. After a few minutes, a guard entered. You're not going to give us any trouble. I promise I'll be good. He called another guard, and together they helped her stand, taking off the straitjacket and leg cuffs. She felt a little wobbly from the drugs. Laura saw taser guns on their belts and billy clubs, but no guns. She rubbed her arms and swung them around, feeling relieved for the freedom. Freedom is not cherished enough. When it's gone, it's amazing to feel again. But when you have it all the time, you forget how well off you are. Am I going back to a regular cell now? You're getting transferred. Turn around and put your hands behind your back. She did as she was told, not wanting to be placed into the straitjacket again for disobedience. Where? He cuffed her wrists. Instead of answering, he led her out of the room, down a long hall to an exit, outside down a ramp, and to a white van. Although she searched for a clock the entire distance, she spotted none. Inside the back of the open van sat two men dressed in white. Where am I going? She demanded. The guard sighed. Psych hospital. You promised no trouble, remember? She looked at the two men in the van. What was so special about white that mental hospitals chose it for their uniforms? The guard helped her up. The van had benches on 3 sides, and the 2 psych staff were on the right side. Laura sat on the left. The walls, door, and ceiling were all padded white. The guard closed the back doors of the van. A crazy house. She was headed to a place where crazy people lived. This was not good. They expected people to try killing themselves there. They would make it harder. For sure, it would be harder. But she had more freedom now. She just had to find the right moment. She smiled at the men. Do one of you happen to know the time? The man on her left with glasses said, Late. Her smile faded. One moment was all she needed to take control and kill herself.